guys, Eckhart's Letter here, in a new excerpt of the upcoming Thrawn book released on Thursday. And I'm kind of surprised because I haven't seen a whole lot of people covering it, so I know I'm a little bit late to the game, but let's go through this excerpt as we did the last one, line by line, and see what we can take out from it to kind of give us an idea of what the book's going to be like. So it basically starts out with Thrawn himself being captured by Eli, who we saw in the last excerpt. So it says, after all the trouble the castaway had created on the planet's surface, Eli had expected him to put up a terrific fight against his captors. To his surprise, he apparently surrendered to the stormtroopers without any resistance at all. Perhaps he was taken by surprise. More likely, he knew resistance was futile. So this is normal Thrawn. He's cool, he's calm, he's calculated, He's got a set of nuts on him. When we saw that in the last excerpt too, when he talked to Palpatine with, although great respect, not a whole lot of fear, but not a whole lot in this first few lines. So let's continue. At least Eli understood now why Park wanted him along. The prisoner's cargo crates were labeled with a Psi Bisti variant. If he spoke that language itself, and it was the only language he spoke, the Imperials would need a translator. So this is interesting, just for a little small reason, and that's because Psi Bisti is actually mentioned in the Outbound Flight books. It's basically a trade language where most of the galaxy uses Galactic Basic or some sort of other, language when speaking interspecies. Psi Bisti was one that was used in the unknown region. So, again, we see Timothy Zahn referring back to his old work and the old history, basically, the old Legends canon to inform the new canon. After that, we have some brief description of Thrawn itself. He's basically walking up into this drop ship, and Eli basically has this internal monologue, which I thought was interesting. He says, back on Lestera, there were myths about beings like that, proud, deadly warriors that the stories named Chiss. So again, we know now that the Chiss, like in past canon, are basically this race that's out in the unknown region. They're very xenophobic. Well, I guess we don't know that they're xenophobic, but they very much like to keep to themselves, obviously, because even this very educated Imperial officer has only heard legends of them. He didn't know whether they were true or not, and he speaks about them with some sort of reverence. I mean, he recognizes that Thrawn might be a Chiss based on just his skin color and his hair and his eyes, so that's interesting. And all this time, Thrawn's actually wearing some skins, like some animal skins and some furs, basically like a pelt, like a very basic, almost primitive outfit. But Eli basically notices that despite this, and despite being flanked on either side by stormtroopers, and he's basically their prisoner, he still has a very regal stance to him. And again, this is just all the things that we already knew about him coming into this novel. And it also kind of suggests maybe that he's pretty comfortable with what's going on, and that this is all kind of going according to his plan. Although, maybe if it wasn't, he probably wouldn't show it anyway. But based on what we read from the first excerpt, I think it's pretty clear that Thrawn is very much intending to be captured by these Imperials here. So they continue walking, and eventually they come aboard a starship. And what's interesting about this starship is that it's actually a Venator-class cruiser. So that kind of helps us put the timeline. We know that it's not too close to A New Hope. We know that it's after, obviously, Return of the Jedi, because they're making references to stormtroopers, and he meets the Empire later, but it's probably not too far after, maybe 5 or 6 years, probably not like 14 years, because the Star Destroyer still hasn't been updated to an actual Star Destroyer. It's still a Venator class cruiser. Thrawn's taken to meet Captain Park, and I accidentally last video thought that Eli and Captain Park were the same person, but they're obviously not. And he brings him aboard, as I said, the Venator, which is called the Strike Fast. And the captain asks Thrawn whether he speaks Basic or whether Psi Bisti would be better. To which actually Eli translated that on behalf of the captain, because remember, Eli is the translator here. Eli apologizes for translating without being asked and tells the captain, I'm sorry, but the Chiss, basically in the stories I've heard, they use Psi Bisti to communicate. And Park doesn't know what the Chiss is, basically continuing this idea that, the Chiss, they're out there in the unknown regions. People don't know about them. They keep to themselves. And Eli basically says, I think he's the Chiss. I've heard of them. They're kind of like a wild space myth. And in the few times they do meet with us, they typically use Sai Bisti. And this is where Thrawn actually speaks for the first time, and he says, yes, because that is also the language you used with us. And this is the first time he speaks, and it basically confirms that, yeah, the Chiss and the rest of the galaxy did have some sort of, have had communications in the past. But Thrawn obviously understands Basic because Eli and Park had been speaking in Basic to each other this whole time, and Eli basically says, well, you can understand Basic, can we talk in that? And Thrawn says, well, I'm more comfortable in Sai Bisti, and Park says, very well, I'm Captain Park, commander of the ship, what's your name? And Eli's about to translate for him, and Park basically says, nope, don't do it, I want to see how much Basic he understands. And that kind of is continuing. I don't know if that's like a power move, because, you know, earlier we kind of saw that he didn't really like being interrupted by Eli without giving Eli permission. And now he's basically saying, no, even though it's easier for him and we can translate for him, we're going to make him speak the language that we use. And Thrawn responds and says his Chiss name, which is the same as it was in Legends canon. I'm not actually going to try to repeat that because people get on me for my pronunciation of Executor, so I don't even want to try that. I said it right there, but it says that when he says that he's looking up, he's sizing up the ship as if he was a military man sizing up his enemy's strengths and weaknesses. So I don't really think that's what he's doing. I think, as we learned from the previous excerpt, the Chiss are in trouble. They've got something knocking at their door in the unknown regions, and I think what Thrawn is doing is checking out this Star Destroyer and wondering, is this enough? Can this help us with whatever we're dealing with out here in the unknown regions? Because that's basically the whole deal. Thrawn is going to the Empire because he knows he can offer some help with whatever this new threat is, and he knows that, you know, aside from that, he's a pretty brilliant military tactician. So he's like, what tools am I going to have to work with if I get help? And is this even going to be enough to help me in the long run? We don't actually get an answer to that because that's the second last line, and the last line is just, but I believe it'd be easier for you to call me Thrawn, because obviously the Chiss name is really hard to pronounce. I mean, it's got apostrophes in it, and that's just crazy. So that's the entire excerpt, and I mean, there's nothing truly groundbreaking, at least not for someone who knows Thrawn as a character, and this is most likely the introduction to Thrawn within the book, so it kind of is interesting how they're setting him up. I mean, he's being captured. We don't really know exactly what he was doing, but something bad enough that he's been captured, and he's being brought onto this enemy ship, this Venator Star Destroyer, and he's flanked by stormtroopers, yet he's not even sweating, and actually he's sizing up the enemy. He's already got his strategic mind working, which is nice, because I just hope that we see Thrawn as the true strategist and the true military genius that he actually is, not just Palpatine's resource for what's in the unknown regions. We learn a bit about the Chiss, and that they are still the same kind of mysterious civilization who doesn't really connect with the rest of the galaxy too much, although they have in the past always through this language, and as I said earlier, this language existed in Star Wars Legends and is now being brought into canon, so that's pretty cool. We also know that Eli wouldn't necessarily say if he's afraid of Thrawn, but he is at least very interested by him, and he's certainly afraid of Park and the higher ranking Imperial officers, so that might be a power dynamic later on. And Park also seemed himself to be a bit not necessarily hot-headed, I guess, but he wants to be in control, and I guess that's a pretty standard Imperial thing, but he's exuding that aspect of it. So yeah, certainly not as groundbreaking as the first excerpt, where it was revealed that there's a threat in the unknown region, and that Thrawn knows Anakin, and he knows his relation with Palpatine. And if you guys haven't read that, you should check that out or go watch my video on the subject. But I want you guys to read this excerpt. I want you to see if you have any questions, any comments, and I want you to analyze not only the actual material, but whether you like the writing in this. Because I know a lot of people had issues with the actual writing in Empire's End, and I think Timothy Zahn is definitely a step up. But some of this does seem a bit rough, but I'm not worried at this point. Anyways, guys, this has been Eckhart's Ladder. Read Thrawn, get pumped. I love you guys. May the Force be with you.